Welcome to another episode of Chewing the Cud. This is episode 29, and the topic today is land and how land is really the most critical piece of this whole component that we call regenerative agriculture. But if you're new to Chewing the Cud, this is a weekly live stream where we sit down at the kitchen table and discuss things related and unrelated to regenerative agriculture. Usually, the way that we run these things is we have a topic for the evening. Today it's land, and
not usually. Starting now.
Last week we did it.
Oh yeah.
Usually we have a topic. We're gonna go over that for the first 20-ish minutes, first chunk of the stream, and we'll give you our sort of thoughts on like what we're thinking about, and then we'll open it up to just free-flowing questions at that point, and it's up to you guys to steer the discussion and see where we take it. It doesn't have to be any of the questions. They don't have to be related to anything we're talking about. You just throw anything out that's on your mind, and we'll do our best to answer it. So usually these go for about an hour, and we're going to sort of keep it to that. We can start off for the newbies with some introductions to who we are and what our situation is here in Central Missouri.
Yeah, my name's Isaac Tappan, and this is Ben Hawley. We're interns here at Green Pastures Farm underneath Greg Judy. Many of you know who he is. If you don't, go to YouTube, search Greg Judy Regenerative Rancher, and you will be entertained.
Nice plug.
For sure.
Nice plug.
Anyways, we run 370 head of South Pole cattle, 160 St. Croix cider hair sheep. We do shiitake logs. We sell bale and rollers, guard dogs. We do a lot here. We host grazing schools, and Ben and I are here to learn. We're actually here for this full year, and then next year we're here for another full year as quasi-apprentices, or like basically employees at that point, or graduated interns.
Whatever you want to call it. We're here for another year. Interns with experience.
Yeah. And so we're happy to be here. We're loving it, learning a lot, and we're trying. This is like our way to kind of share our knowledge that we've learned, and it also helps us, sink in that knowledge into our brain.
And think about like we get questions and topics to talk about all the time from this that are like something that we've never really thought about specifically before, and so it's really cool to sort of be like see where other people's heads are at and bouncing ideas off each other and that type of deal. It's definitely fun for us. And for those who are new, or maybe for those who have been listening for a while but haven't caught the recent posts and stuff, there is a YouTube component to this. It went live today, and at some point during the week, I'll be uploading this episode along with a bunch of useful clips from this episode onto the YouTube channel. The link is in my bio. It might be a little bit difficult to find on YouTube because it's such a new channel at this point that it's not going to be in the algorithm very high on the searchable content. But if you search Chewing the Cud, Ben Hawley, or Chewing the Cud, like grazing, or like something, Chewing the Cud and something else related to me or Isaac or Greg Judy or something like that, it should start to pop up. But to be safe, just click on the link in my bio, and it'll take you there. So if you like watching that kind of stuff that way, just spread the word.
It'll be a same thing as here. So if you guys are seeing it live, that'll be like the edited version.
Like this full episode will be uploaded, but it won't be live. So you'll be able to watch it back after the fact. And I'll repost the full length thing here as well. But then I also I'm taking the full length episode and I'm breaking it down into clips of useful information, useful answers to questions, topics, that kind of deal. And it'll just be a lot easier to search and index did they talk about guardian dogs at one point? You can just look up in the clips playlist the guardian dog stuff, and you'll be able to watch just 2, 3, 4, 5 minute clips instead of having to watch a whole episode to find that piece. Trying that out. There's supposed to be some kinks with that, so we'll work those out as they come up. But
while we're on the social media, if you're not following me, go follow me. Ben's tagged me in posts. My handle is Isaac Tappenden, all lowercase.
Yep.
if you'd like. I don't post as much as Ben does.
Yeah, I've been slacking off a little
know.
bit because we've been a little busy this week, but we can get to that at some point.
I'm thinking I'm gonna try to start. I got a phone update, so I'm gonna try to start getting more involved. So
awesome. Yeah. Well,
with that,
let's start with the topic for today, which is land and the role of land in regenerative agriculture. And I guess I'll just start by saying that it's sort of a funny concept to even be talking about, because it seems like obvious or like self-evident that land and agriculture should be like the inextricable link, like they should be like one and the same. But it's like agriculture has gotten to this point where there's this disconnect between the land and the ecology of a given place and the like agriculture or production that's being done on that land. And so a lot of what regenerative agriculture in general, regardless of whether it's livestock or not, sort of the goal is to be harnessing those natural cycles and natural processes to your benefit, so that you're actually healing that land and, you know, raising products and making a living off of it. So I guess we'll sort of just talk about the fact that from our perspective, we're talking about like grazing operations and stuff like that. Like really what you want to be concentrating on is a concept of like ecological literacy, some people call it, which is you're familiar enough with the processes and ecosystem services that are going on at a given location that you understand feedback that the land is telling you. Like, you know, are you overstocked? Are you overgrazing? Is there a drought coming on? You know, like what the different plant species are indicating about your soil, like that kind of stuff. It would all be under the umbrella of ecological literacy. And so really, like in order to, like really, I guess what I wanted to talk about is the fact that, so it's really easy to like paint like industrial agriculture as a scale, like a really easy target for like agriculture being disconnected from the land and from like natural processes, because, you know, like big crop farmers are just, you know, nuking the soil with like herbicides and pesticides and then just planting whatever the heck you want, like planting alfalfa in the middle of the desert in Arizona.
Very mechanical mindset,
yeah,
you know.
Yeah.
All plug and chug and just it's all machine. You just plug inputs.
As long as I got enough chemicals or enough fertilizers or enough machinery, I can make any crop, any livestock work in any situation. It's the
human brain. We're so intelligent we can make it work where it shouldn't work.
And so that's like the easy target as far as like disconnect from nature and disconnect from ecological services. But like the other thing that I don't think is talked a lot about is on small scale agriculture, especially in the organic, regenerative, sustainable, whatever you want to call it, like space, there's still a level of disconnect where people get this idea in their head. They have the best intentions, but they get this idea in their head like, oh, I want to run cattle like Greg Judy. And so they're like start to go out and try to buy South Poles. They want to stock to, you know, whatever it is, 2 acres per animal, like that kind of stuff, when in reality, like their environment in their market would best suit, but that's a different topic, but we're just talking about land here, their environment would be best suited for goats or for sheep or something like that. And because they're so zeroed in on like, this is what I really want to be doing, they're not paying attention to any of the signs and signals that piece of land is telling them when they've started stocking it with cattle, for example, when it really is best suited for something else. So
a good example of that is probably one of the most common questions that we get asked is, and I'm just giving an example. Oh, I've got 40 acres. How many cows can I run? And when you think of like, there's so many different variables in that. Like how dry is your land? Are you in Arizona? Are you in Washington State? Are you in, you know, all these different places? What kind of grasses are you growing? What kind of stocking rate does your, you know, county have, like on an average? Mm-hmm. What kind of cattle you running? Are you running 2,000 pound big old Charolais cows, or are you running little Dexters? I mean, there's just so much that goes into it that it's very location dependent, mm-hmm. and enterprise dependent or whatever. So
and so I guess like really the important, really sort of the important step, like next step to this whole thing is, okay, that's all well and good. Like, you know, I understand the fact that I need to be paying attention to what the land is telling me, but what does that even mean? And like, how do you go about deciphering that, and how do you go about making sure you're not just trying to like shove a square peg into a round hole type deal? And like, it's something that I really want to focus on with this live stream and the stuff that I put out in general is the fact that there's a lot, especially in agriculture, but in any field, there's a lot of theory that gets bounced around, and a lot of like conceptual ideas of how things should be done, or and a lot of that stuff is great, and it's really good to sort of like spur your creative mind and think about things a little bit differently. But there's a lot of the time very little focus put on like, okay, the concept of ecological literacy makes sense, but how do I actually use that, you know, daily in my operation, right? So that implementation step is something that I really want to make sure we try to get across and focus on whenever we talk about things like this, which are sort of more like not as concrete. They're more philosophical, heady, whatever you want to talk, however you want to call it. So if I was starting on a new piece of land, or I'd never farmed before or ran livestock or anything before, like what would I do to make sure that I'm like paying attention to the ecological literacy piece of this? And I would say you want to try to find people operating in an environment similar to yours. They don't necessarily need to be like right next door to you, although that would be super helpful, but somewhere with a similar climate. So if I was in Tennessee, like, you know, Greg's stuff would probably be pretty applicable.
Or maybe you find someone in Tennessee.
Maybe you find someone in Tennessee who's doing it. That'd be even better. But what you want to do is just find something that's as close as you can get to what you're going to be dealing with, and learn and look at their operation and try to learn from them about like things that they're paying attention to, you know, grass species that they're really keyed in on, like, you know, what the sort of like natural history is of the given land that you're on, what the actual history is of the land that you're on. Was it used for, you know, cropping? Was it plowed back in the 30s? Was it just, you know, forested? Has it been desert since, you know, 1860? You know what I mean? Like, you just have all of that information is relevant and important. And so you want to be looking at people nearby, seeing what they're doing. If they're doing regenerative stuff, even better. But you could even be looking at people who are just like running livestock conventionally, and you still could learn a little bit from them, like what kind of water system.
Learn a lot from them.
What kind of water systems are they using? You know,
what kind of grasses are they grazing?
Even if they're not doing it right, like it's still like there's a lot of like cattlemen and ranchers out there that
how are they handling their livestock? You know, there's a lot of things in, like, it doesn't even have to be with cattle. It's any kind of, like, you know, agriculture operation, whether even if you're doing, you know, if you're trying to do like cover crops, you can go to a crop farmer and learn a lot, like just tractor handling skills, or when to plant this certain species. Even if they are spraying Roundup and you're against that, you're still going to learn things that you can take and apply with what you want to do.
So that would be sort of the implementation piece of this whole thing is find an adaptable model, so to speak. Find somebody like it would be ideal if that adaptable model was as close to you as it could be. But if not, just understand that the farther away environmentally that you get from your location. So if you're in Arizona and Greg is in like central Missouri, there's going to be a larger amount, I should say, of adaptation that needs to happen. Like, there's going to be some concepts and principles and stuff that will be universal, but there's also going to be a lot of little things that are going to be completely different from a management perspective.
Another huge resource that I don't think is taken advantage of as often as it could is the NRCS. There is just boatloads of information on, you know, grass species in your area, or, you know, stocking rates, or water systems, and maybe, I mean, I'm not telling you, you know, go run into the NRCS, get a cost share program or whatever, but like the guys that work there, they know what they're doing. I went at that grazing conference, or the beef roundup table that I went to with Greg. Chris Peterson was there. He worked for the NRCS. He was a forage specialist, and that guy knows his stuff, and he knows, you know.
Is it Chris or Doug?
Doug, did I say Chris?
I said Chris. Sorry,
Doug Peterson. Sorry. And he knows his stuff, and he knows, you know, grasses and what to plant if you're, you know, if you're looking at planting something, or what, you know, how like grasses perform in different environments, like just the amount of people working there that have like that knowledge. It's just like a huge resource that you can tap into. So that's just definitely something to think about.
And really, at the end of the day, it's like a plan, like execute, evaluate, and then readjust your plan. Like that's really what you should be constantly doing with every bit of management that you're using on your farm, because you know, it's the management that we do in the summertime is different from the management that we do in the fall, is different from the management that we do in the winter. And so like the only way that you can figure out the best sort of secret sauce for your environment is to take the best known practices, the best information that you can, and then use it, but then always have an open eye for this is working, this isn't working, maybe we should try this, and not be afraid to try some things differently. And if you pay attention and you take notes and record results and readjust, you'll get there. Like every environment's got their own little quirks, but I mean, there's living things everywhere. So
everything has their disadvantages, but everything has their advantages as well.
So it's focusing on those advantages and working around the disadvantages is really the bottom line. So yeah, that's what makes it exciting. Like it's a dynamic business. Like there's no cookie cutter anything about it. And it's what's frustrating, and it's what prevents it from becoming like mass scale industrialized, but
maybe that's a good thing.
But maybe that's a good thing. But it's I mean, we would argue it's the way things should be, but it's just more complicated and nuanced, just like the natural world is, you know. There's just so much diversity and so much complexity to it. If you're really keying in on that and utilizing it to your advantage, whatever you come up with is going to be diverse and complex. Also.
And it's gonna fit you as a person
Yep,
too.
that's the other piece. I mean, we're just focusing on land, but like that, it also applies to like your own personal life and like your work-life balance and what makes you happy, and also applies to your business and your marketing and what products you're actually selling and how you're selling them, and that kind of evaluation and readjusting and stuff should be taking place in all those areas. But those are for other live streams.
Yes.
So I don't know how long we went on that, but
I don't think I can check on here.
No. We started just after 7:30, so it's probably 15-20 minutes.
That was a good talk.
Yeah, I think it's probably good. We're gonna jump into some questions, and from here on out, it's all up to you guys. Anything you're thinking about related to land, related to regenerative agriculture, not at all. You know, what we had for dinner, that kind of stuff. That's all fair game too.
Green Wolf the puppy's been asking some questions while we were talking.
Yeah, and we'll make sure we're reading the questions out loud, because on the recordings of these that we'll post to YouTube and Instagram, they won't have the comments sitting there. So we'll make sure we read them as we go along.
He was talking about the sideways camera angle, and he said, well, I guess it works better now that we're both sheared like sheep back from our vacation, our holidays at home.
Yeah.
He says, were you aware that most of the area in Arizona and New Mexico used to be grasslands, but now they're classified as desert? Yeah, I didn't know that, but that's a classic example of like Alan Savory's desertification theory, that when brittle environments are left unmanaged, managed improperly, just abandoned
with no rest, essentially.
With no rest, or with even just abandoned, because the grass oxidizes. And converts to desert. So, yeah. Crazy.
It's like the absence of, in theory, be the absence of adequate stocking rates is really what causes brittle environments to turn to desert.
And rest and recovery too.
Yeah. So like you need to have the animal density, but you also need to have the migration patterns of those animals in order to achieve longer rest periods. So yeah. But if you don't have it, it just turns to sand.
It's crazy.
It's pretty crazy. Let's see.
What questions would you ask yourself? I think we were talking about the, adjust or.
Oh yeah. What questions would you ask of? Yeah, we kind of answered it, but what questions would you ask of a counterpart that's that's like, is that what the question is?
I think he said, what questions would you ask yourself? Probably I think it was when we were talking about like what would you do going into a new environment, and we kind of answered that.
We kind of answered that.
Have you heard any updates on the Arizona project?
Good question.
So Greg went and did the first, that first Arizona project where he built the fence.
I think they trenched water lines too. Maybe?
They did, yeah. They put one water line down the center. We did a cost analysis deal on another project. I don't know if Greg, that might pan out to be something, that might not. We don't know yet. But we've got the plan. We've sent them the plans and the cost of it and everything, and so we'll see. That might be something. Greg had talked about maybe sending us down there.
Yeah,
who knows what's gonna happen, but that would be cool. It'd be hot and a lot of work, but it'd be cool.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I don't think there's really been any major updates as far as the Arizona project's concerned.
No.
Is there anything else?
Yes. Which was your favorite book by Greg Judy? I'm starting Comeback Farms now. I think Comeback Farms. So the funny thing about Greg's 2 books he's got out right now.
When was the last
No Risk
one?
Ranching.
When was the most recent one published?
Comeback Farms.
Well, when was it published? It was like
in
2008
or something.
It
was a while ago. So his first book he was talking about, which is No Risk Ranching. He was talking about custom grazing on leased land with other people's cattle, and I think he was in the whole, graze it early, just keep it short,
like MIG,
management intensive grazing, high density, just nuke the grass, and that was bad for his animal performance and for his land, or for his plant health, really. So then his next book kind of updated a little bit from that and kind of morphed into
like a holistic management style ish.
But from where we're at now to
it's
that book is totally different.
And that's the reason why he's writing another book.
Yeah, so if you don't know, Greg he's finishing it. I mean,
they're editing it.
Yeah, they're editing it, and so we don't know when it's going to be out, but we're both probably going to read it. Yeah, I'm going to read it. I don't know.
I would read it just to see,
just to see what it's about.
Yeah. But I mean, and that's harkens back to the point that we were trying to stress at the beginning of this, which is like Greg has constantly evolved his process and constantly listened to like what his animals are telling him and what his land is telling him. So what he does today in 2021 is vastly different from what he does what he did back in 2008. But there's still some like underlying principles and techniques and how we set up water stuff and like that kind of thing. That's
handle leases and
like all that's the same, and all that is like there's still tons of lessons in those books, but just know that the nuts and bolts of like how things are managed today are entirely different from when those books were written. But
I definitely would recommend reading
100%.
I read both of them.
They're good. Like there's a lot of good. There's some funny stories in there too.
Some funny stories.
But there's a lot, and now we know a lot of the places and characters in the stories, and so it's kind of funny. But they're good books, entertaining. They're easy to read.
They're a very transparent look at what Greg is like, because the way he writes is the exact same way he tells stories.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's pretty funny. He's a storyteller.
He is.
So I have a question. Do we bale in spring in addition to stockpiling in fall? We don't bale any hay here on the farm. We buy in all our hay. We bought in 300 some bales.
Yeah.
300 some round bales. We didn't probably need.
I bet it was closer to 400.
Oh yeah, including.
The 70 from Brian and
the poor quality ones.
I bet it was like 400 bales.
A lot.
He doesn't need that much hay. It's just that this year, he was able to find a lot of hay for cheap, but also this year hay was very cheap because the summer was like perfect growing conditions.
And
Here in
baling
Missouri.
conditions.
Yeah, there was like periods of dry, and then like
Nice
basically we
rains.
got a rain whenever we needed it. Good warm weather. Ideal grass growing.
We don't bale hay just because well, there's a lot of reasons, but
Yeah.
mainly, so when you bale hay on your pastures, it sets back that land. If you don't add any more nutrient, if you don't fertilize it
which is
prior to baling,
which is not something that we're interested in at all in the regenerative space. But
so if you don't fertilize it, even you could fertilize it with barn manure
or compost or whatever,
chicken litter or something, but that's
a whole other story to be able to do that.
Anyways, if you're not fertilizing your hay, it takes 5 to 7 years for that piece of land to recover back to where the state that it's in. So each time you bale hay, you're setting your land back. If you're not fertilizing it, you're setting your land back 5 years, and so.
Even if you feed directly on the exact same spot that you baled it from,
you only retain 80% of the, once you cut the hay and you bale it up, you've automatically lost 20% of the nutrients just from leaching into the not leaching now evaporating into the air or whatever.
But also there's the secondary piece of it too, which is by mowing off the grass down that short, you're just letting all the elements, the sun, temperatures, like heavy rain, like that kind of stuff, just like absolutely hammer the soil surface, which completely changes the environment for those microbes that are really running the show down there. And so when you upend their world like that, like all those processes that they're helping facilitate come to a grinding halt, which doesn't help at all with your soil fertility in the slightest. Plus, you're driving equipment on pasture.
And another thing is, nowadays you can buy hay for the cost of baling hay. You can buy hay in, or actually cheaper. It's hard
to bale hay for $40 a bale delivered, which is what $42.
$42 a bale, which this year was a cheap year, but $42 a bale delivered to the farm.
Yeah.
You couldn't hardly bale it for that, and so.
And it was exceptional quality hay.
And you got to think of it like this too. When you're buying in the hay, that's like buying in nutrients. You're only bringing in nutrients. You're not selling hay and getting rid of nutrients or taking nutrients away. You're only bringing it in. So you're just building that fertility base as the years go.
You're turning an extractive process, which is what like mowing hay is, an extractive process. You're turning an extractive process into an additive process. You're turning an output from the land, where you'd be taking from it, into an input where you're just throwing carbon, throwing nutrients, throwing fertility, seed, all that good stuff back into the system. And so that's sort of where Greg's head is at, and and we agree with it.
On board
with that. That's the reason why he doesn't bale it. And we don't own the equipment to bale it.
Or we don't have the time
to bale it. So
we'd rather put our energies toward keeping the cattle moving. And monitoring the cattle's health and the sheep too, and so. That's a good one though.
There's more to it also than that, but I think
we've got into it in various
some past live streams. But it's an important question because it's something that's it's very common. People baling their own hay is very common in the industry, and so it's sort of a strange.
And it's not like we're it's not like we're criticizing people that bale hay. We see the benefits of not baling our own, and so for us that makes it for us.
That's our opinion.
If baling hay, gets you going, and that's what you love to do in your life,
and you can
you can do it profitably. Go for it. That's what you.
It just doesn't work for this.
Yeah,
this
for this
system.
operation.
Yeah,
so.
It really doesn't.
Oh, that's a good one. Have you read any other books like Call of the Reed Warbler by Charles Massey in Australia?
I finished. That was the most recent book that I've. Well, that's a lie. That was one of the most recent regenerative agriculture book that I've read. And yeah, I thought it was a phenomenal book. That's where the ecological literacy stuff comes from, mechanical mindset. A lot of that stuff is now in my lexicon, and it's because of the it's because of that book. It's a phenomenal read. It's like it's very very specific when it comes to Australian regenerative agriculture and Australian natural history, but the fact that it is so specific makes it so much more valuable because you can understand that like books like that and information like that is and could be written about for pretty much every location on Earth that people want to do.
It goes into what we were talking about earlier with the land management, how like, and he like I've just started it, but he dives right into how like all of Australia's history back thousands and thousands of years
since the arrival
ago,
of like the first peoples,
and like how like their fire stick farming and all that kind of stuff, and how like plugging becoming part of the land you are in, nesting yourself into that little part of creation or whatever, and making it and not becoming a like a negative draw, instead like increasing the commons or whatever.
You like become part of like the new equilibrium basically. And like right now with the way that the humans at large in 2021 are like treating the earth, we are not reached an equilibrium. We are just pushing it down this downward slope. And so
what is
the Anthropocene. It's like in order to achieve that balance, we need to start like regenerating a lot of these resources that we've been extracting for decades and decades. And so if you're able to reach that equilibrium where now you're part of it as opposed to just trying to take it from it as much as you can while it's still there. I mean, this is getting into a whole different philosophy.
Books like that just get your head spinning.
It's really well written. It's not like super heady and hard to understand. It's really well written. It's just like lots of like awesome information and thoughts for sure. It's an awesome book. I think anybody interested in that kind of stuff, you have to read that book.
What sort of ballpark recovery time is needed for an arid environments like Arizona?
Depends.
So there's a Instagram account, Jeffers Cattle Co.
Yep. Shout out to those guys. Chihuahua, Mexico.
And they are on a full year rotation or something.
Like
360 days.
300 plus days recovery.
Yeah.
If you're in not quite as an arid environment as Chihuahua, Mexico, you can reduce it, to a couple hundred days or whatever, but you're talking hundreds of days of recovery in desert environments roughly, as opposed to here, which is like
the shortest Greg has done is 28
day recovery versus and the longest that we ever do is like probably 90 to 100 is probably the longest.
Not counting the winter when we're managing stuff.
But if there's a drought, it would be like
120.
It'd be like 120 max. Would probably be the max.
But that's like
that's extreme scenario, and they're normally like 3 times that as far as recovery.
Crazy.
So it's just insanity. It's totally different environment, but it can be done.
Yeah, it shows you someone's doing it, and they're doing good.
You just have to adapt. Operation. You have to adapt to that. But just longer recovery periods. You gotta match the regrowth time. That's really all it is.
All right. I'm expanding my sheep rotation this year to 2 fields. One was hay and one was brush hog once a year. The hayfield is clearly going to take longer to rebuild. With sheep, the sheep are gonna love the brush hog paddock just because there's gonna be a lot more like forbs and woody species. But I mean, if the hayfield was it was hayed and it wasn't fertilized, then it's probably gonna take a little while to build that fertility back up. But
running sheep on it's gonna help.
It's gonna it's just like anything. You gotta start and it keep at it. It'll
if you keep down the right path, it'll start to turn around. Everything takes time. That's the other thing with this is like people get all bent out of shape because they're not seeing stuff happen fast enough. Like they're expecting in 2 or 3 years my place is going to look like Green Pastures Farm, and it's like maybe, but you need to be starting from a pretty darn good spot in order to get to from 2 to 3 years to get to here. If you're starting from like completely overgrazed, like crop fields, like anything like that, hay fields, whatever. It's just gonna take time. Like it takes time to get time, and you shouldn't be stressed about the fact that you're not seeing results. You're not seeing results, because it's a slow process.
It just makes me think of there's places on this farm, like the runway.
Yeah.
His dad used to,
Greg's dad.
Greg's dad used to moldboard plow and plant corn on the on this runway, we call it. It's a long strip of land, and now it's like once like August hits, about lance leaf ragweed is about all you can find in that in the pasture. So it's like,
but it's growing lance leaf ragweed.
It's growing something, and there's little bits of a little bit of orchard grass or some what else is there? Some love grass maybe or something.
Maybe a little bit of fescue.
A little bit of fescue. Now that it's cooler season, there's definitely fescue.
But in the summer.
But it's like even Greg is still in that process of turning it around, and he's seen it turn it. It started that in his time that he's done this, but I mean, there's just so much potential for where it could go.
Yep.
You think of like even like when the Indians are around or whatever, like before.
Yep. Before white settlers.
Before white men. Or like when like the like Lewis and Clark or other explorers were going into the Midwest and even farther, they would write stories of how they could tie the grass above their saddle while they're sitting on the horse. And that was like big blue stem or Indian grass.
We have some of it that's 7.5 feet tall.
It's just crazy.
Yeah.
Like, to think like it would just be covered in big blue, like just thick. Oh.
Yeah.
And like that's what it was, and then with modern, or not modern, but industrial or very simplistic agriculture mindsets.
Yeah, exactly.
It has deteriorated it, but it can grow to that stage again. It just takes the right management and time.
You just got to get the cycles. You got to get those natural cycles that gave way to that grass, to that specific ecosystem. You just got to get them rolling again. Mm-hmm. And once they start rolling and cycling, you just have to keep making sure that cycle is in the correct parameters, and if you can just maintain the correct parameters for those cycles to operate, it's going to heal itself.
What was it you said the one time? It's like this big wheel or whatever.
Yeah.
You get spinning and you get it going, and then you just like make sure.
It's like a big bicycle wheel.
Yeah.
Spinning around, and like once you get it going with your initial effort, all you got to do is just tap it. Just make sure you tap it every once in a while to keep it spinning and keep it at speed. Mm-hmm. You don't need to be like grabbing it and trying to throw it again, because you'll bring it to a complete stop. You just have to once you get it going, which takes some effort, you just got to keep tapping at it, and it'll just keep spinning and keep spinning and keep spinning, and the results are, fields full of big blue stem and like incredible grazing and building topsoil, and it's pretty nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it's gets you excited. What else we got?
Okay, this is good. Haying doesn't set your fields back. It's extremely expensive. Haying doesn't set your fields back. It's extremely expensive to start. We bale a lot of hay and see why you guys buy your hay in. Yeah, it doesn't set your fields back if you're putting in the fertility and doing it the correct way.
Yeah.
But it can if you're. Like,
we're just talking about purely
just going in and bailing
the hay.
Taking it, bailing it, taking it out. You're just taking all those nutrients from the land. Like, it took nutrients to grow that grass.
Yeah.
So when you cut it down, bale it up, and get it out of there, it's not there.
It's not just like an unlimited store of whatever, phosphorus.
At least not in Rucker, Missouri, too.
Yeah.
There's 2 inches of topsoil.
Back home, maybe where you are.
Yeah, maybe in a foot of topsoil. You could hay it for a while and it would be fine. And it's probably not the same as it is here in Missouri, which that's probably what you're talking about. But it definitely, if you're not giving back
in some way,
whether that's, I don't know, feeding some hay back onto it, or getting some kind of fertilizer or like natural fertilizer. Maybe you're putting chicken litter, or maybe you're doing a deep bedding system like Joel Salatin does, and spreading it out that way.
Yeah.
But you need to be doing something, and yeah. Why unroll hay instead of feeding in hay racks that reduce waste? That's a
great
That's
question.
a really good question.
Yeah.
You want to start with that?
Yeah. So, first of all, there's no such thing as waste when it comes to hay, because like what we were just talking about, if whatever doesn't get consumed by the cattle is going to get remetabolized by the soil. It's going to get eaten by microbial activity. It's going to get eaten by earthworms. It's going to get eaten by all sorts of critters in the soil that are really run the show, like we were talking about earlier. Like the health of those guys is really what grows grass. Like the cattle are just helping those little microbes live, essentially.
When they're stepping, they're waking it up. They're doing that. When they're defecating and urinating, they're feeding, giving them extra nutrients and food to metabolize.
So there's no such thing as waste when it comes to hay. It's just hay that your cows haven't eaten.
Yes.
Like that waste.
It's not going to go through a cow, but
it's still going to be feeding the soil. So that's the first part. So the way that we will view hay, because when you unroll it, right, you're going to get a certain percentage of the hay that's going to be consumed by the animal, and a certain percentage of that hay that's going to get trampled into the ground. And that varies depending on how wet it is, how much the quality of the hay, how much stockpile is available for the cattle to eat. It is going to depend on how much hay gets trampled versus how much hay gets consumed. And ideally, we want a percentage of that bale to be trampled. We don't want them to consume all of that hay, because we want to be feeding the soil, essentially. And so by unrolling it, what you're doing is you're spreading those nutrients, that seed, that fertility, if you will. Instead of it being in this tiny little area, you're spreading it over a quarter acre, a third of an acre, like however long you're able to unroll that hay. And so that the impact of that hay bale is like affects a much larger area. And then you're also not worrying about the fact that when a bunch of cows get around a bale ring, they're just going to nuke the sod right in that area if it's wet, and essentially kill it. You'll just grow ragweed in this part of the country the next year if you do that, which is not ideal. And so that way you're like distributing that impact over a larger area. More the animals can eat at one given point in time.
Like in a bale ring, maybe max 20 cows could be eating. So then, say so it takes 3 to 4 bales for the mob that we've got for half a day. So say we put out 3 or 4 bale rings, at 20 cows max per bale ring at a time. That's 80 cows eating at one time.
Yeah, 60 to 80 cows.
That still leaves 290 cows or cattle head, like calves, bulls, steer, whatever else isn't eating, whatever's not the 80 dominant cows. They're not getting anything to eat right then. And so by spreading it out, every single animal in the herd gets a bite to eat, and pretty much gets their fill, because that's enough for them to eat. That's what they need for the day. So that's why we do it.
And you don't have to worry about like calves getting crushed or like stomped into the mud or something like that. And you don't have to move bale rings around.
And you don't have to get a tractor out there.
That's the other thing.
Which I guess you really don't need a tractor to do a bale ring.
But like you have to move. I mean, like you roll the bale rings around, but it's still like it's annoying as heck. Versus
taking them out of the mud.
Versus you just have a bale and rolling trailer on your 4-wheeler. Just back it up to a round bale. Drive the spikes, jack it up, drive it wherever you want. Unroll it in certain spots. Unroll it in other spots. You get to sort of paint where you want the impact to be.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's like it's like you having a direct impact on what's going to be fertilized next year. You know, like the cattle are still fertilizing the whole paddock with their manure and urine, but wherever you're spreading that hay, there's going to grow more grass next year. It's just a guarantee if you're leaving a little bit of residual left.
I think
plug for Greg Judy bale and rollers. We're selling them.
We're selling them. We still have some for sale.
They're good stuff.
The supply is actually limited, so if you're thinking about getting one this year,
you might want to
get on that. Yeah.
Our bale and roller manufacturer can only kick out one a day. That's like the rate that he can produce them at, and so we sell 5 in a week, and that's a full
week's worth of production.
So and it doesn't take long when someone comes asking for 3 and someone comes asking for 2, and so.
It goes.
All right. That was a good one though.
Yep. I hope it answers questions about bale rings versus.
Any thoughts on adding nutrients back to the land with chicken litter or biosolids? I don't have any experience with biosolids, and I can't say that I have experience with chicken litter. I've heard of people doing it. I've heard Greg talk about it. The thing you just got to be aware of is what they have in the chicken litter. It could be, you could have feathers, you could have dead chickens, you could have their bedding, whatever they're using. Obviously the litter, the manure. It definitely. I mean, it's a fertilizer. Another thing to consider is a lot of chicken barns, they use antibiotics in their feed, and so by spreading that chicken litter, that's going to go right out onto your land. So if that's something you're concerned about, like if you're trying to produce an organic,
grass-fed
product,
beef,
that technically,
yeah.
I mean, that might pollute your land or your product. But
it's
it
also,
definitely is a fertility boost.
It's also hot, so you have to be careful.
Yeah,
like it's really high in nitrogen.
High nitrogen.
Yeah.
High nitrogen carbon ratio.
I
think, what is it, like? What is it, 30 to 1?
I don't want to.
I don't know.
I don't want to say something that I don't know.
I don't know.
But yeah,
Joel Salatin has a lot in his book about the carbon.
Yeah.
His books about carbon nitrogen ratios and stuff, and you can look it up online or.
The only thing also to think about, like, if you're gonna be any kind of like additional amendment or input to the soil, even if it's whatever, compost, right? Like even if it's not chemicals or fertilizers or whatever, compost or chicken litter or whatever, something to consider is the fact that, like, in order to use, like, it's an input, as in it's going to require mechanical work and labor in order to physically spread that on your land. So that's just something to consider. If you can design a system like we have here and a lot of other people do, where there's no mechanical input, a mechanical amendment to the soil other than feeding hay and running cattle or sheep. Like you're not loading up a manure spreader with compost. You're not loading up a manure spreader with chicken litter. You're not like having to drive tractors and heavy equipment around, and time and money to operate that stuff in order to like make the system run. You know what I mean? Like here, it's none of that. It's literally just the cattle. Like the cattle, and the only input is spreading hay.
On the normal basis. There is instances where and Greg's talked about this to us, and it's one of those. It's like a kind of a controversial thing in this regenerative space, which a lot of people say you really shouldn't be using chemical fertilizers because they're petroleum based and they're harmful to the soil. And then there's also the side of, and Ian Mitchell-Innes, which is Greg's mentor, has talked about this, where if you've got the opportunity to use it to boost yourself to a place like fertility wise where you can be more productive and it makes economical sense, maybe that's something you should consider.
We're talking about spreading like phosphorus or lime.
Which lime, it's not technically a chemical fertilizer.
It's like ground up rock, but still,
rock.
It's in that realm of amendment. Yeah, it's just it's an interesting conversation to have.
Worm poop is balanced. It's a balanced pH. It has there's 30 or some different micronutrients or whatever. Like a worm casting is like picture perfect soil. So the more earthworms you got, the more soil you're gonna be growing. So focus on that. That's a big thing.
And I don't know enough. I know some stuff about soil health, but I don't know enough about. This was a question that I posed to Greg, and maybe somebody out there can come up with an answer. I'd love to get into a discussion about this, either during the live stream or at some point down the road. But I posed this question to Greg about the whole using like a crutch, so to speak, to boost yourself up, not relying on it like phosphorus, but using phosphorus to boost yourself to a certain point, and then at that higher point of fertility, then using that as a springboard to just operate normally with no inputs, right? That's
his theory.
The theory of what we were just talking about. But the
Yeah, I know exactly.
The question that I posed to Greg was like, and I don't know the answer to this. It was like, so it by like injecting the soil with like a big burst of phosphorus, yes, like you may be helping yourself in the short term as far as like you're gonna boost fertility for that year, like several years.
Forage production.
Yeah, several years after that or whatever. But are you actually shooting yourself in the foot long term? Because that kind of input is inevitably not part of the natural cycle of the soil and its capability of metabolizing and producing readily available phosphorus, for example. And so by putting in that big shot of phosphorus, are you like stalling that cycle? And then you're having to like work through that to get that going again, where you might be better off on like a 20-30 year time scale if you had, instead of like just been patient, and you're gonna come up with like a more resilient system in the end. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like that was the question.
Like, is it artificial fertility?
Yeah. Is it like, are you giving yourself a boost, but in the long run, your peak is gonna be lower?
Later.
Well, it's gonna be like your peak will be lower because it's gonna take. So let's just say take a 20-year time scale, right? Year one, you give yourself a phosphorus boost. Mm-hmm. That puts you up to like, you know, whatever, like 50% of your max fertility, right? And so for those 20 years, you're operating from that 50% upwards. And you go from 50 to 55 to 60, 65. And then by the time the 20 years are over, you're at like 80% of the max, right? Mm-hmm. Would you be better off instead, though, not using the phosphorus in the beginning, and you're way down low at like 12% or whatever, and then the first 10 years, you're just creeping along at like, you know, whatever, 20%, whatever, 23% increase, 24, 25, 26. And then at a certain point, it starts to roll. And then after the 20 years, all of a sudden you're at like 85, 90% of your max, because that cycle, that natural cycle of phosphorus, like metabolism and production, is at a much healthier spot than it was because you didn't inject it with like an artificial hit of phosphorus, which sets you back a couple years in the beginning. Like this is the thought that like I had and was trying to explain to Greg, but I don't know if that's even real. Like I don't know if it's a concern. I don't know if it's just in my own head. I don't know. So like that's where like I'd love to learn more about it to understand it.
It's like, is it like a, not like a drug, but like, you know, something that like like something that weakens your, or like takes the place of your immune system.
Yep.
But then ends up not strengthening your immune system. Yep. So then when you're off of it, it takes a lot longer to then build your immune system back up.
Yeah. It's hard to explain. I think it's starting to make sense, but like I think the way I explained it will make sense to some people, but
yeah, it makes sense to me.
Yeah, but I don't know what the answer is, and I'd love it if somebody who's more educated in the soil space would chime in. But just interesting things to think about. I'm reading a book on soil right now, or started reading it, but haven't recently. We've been so busy.
Yeah, they said does set your field back with hay. So, you know, the people said...
Yeah. A bit of a typo.
I was going to say, I was like, that doesn't... Like, the way you were explaining it, and then you said doesn't. Then I was like, I'm just going to roll with it.
All right, let's roll, because we got a little bit of time left.
Have you seen other videos or talks, like Understand Ag Channel did a talk on desert ranching with Alejandro Carali... I don't know.
You're trying the Spanish pronunciation.
Trying to. Not really. I haven't.
Have we seen
videos or talks about like
grazing in arid environments? I haven't, because it's not something that we're.
Yeah, I know.
That we're
it's something I'm definitely interested.
I'm interested in it. It's just not something that we deal with on a daily basis, so it's not a priority to get educated on.
Apart from like Alan Savory videos or like stuff like that, I haven't really. I don't know too much about it.
Yeah. I'm keen to learn though.
Yes, me too. We have a custom farmer who bales our fields at $30 a bale. If you leave enough litter on the soil after cutting, and that is not a concern, is there any changes in the grazing rotation schedule? If you leave cutting, she's saying so like, if like you know you mow it high, is there enough left to graze? You know, after you bale.
Yeah.
It depends on how soon you go back after he mows it.
And I'll say this too, like Greg will clip certain parts of the pasture, which is not mowing for hay, but it's like
it's mowing.
It's similar to like if you were to mow it, like if you were to leave a lot of residual on your hay field or whatever, it's kind of similar to that. And he will never clip ahead of the cattle.
Yep.
He always will clip after the cattle have gone through. And the reason for that is to maximize recovery period before the cattle can graze it. So in an ideal world, you wouldn't be grazing it immediately afterwards.
If you're cutting it, you're cutting something that the cattle could have eaten and gained weight on. So another thing too is, you mow your hay and you take it out of there, then you take your cattle on. You're leaving your cattle with, like, let's say you mowed it off at, 6 inches. That bottom 6 inches of grass is where the most parasites are located. Mm-hmm. So you're essentially, you're putting your animals most at risk, and it may not be a problem if you're moving them quick enough. And
the other thing to consider is if you got a lot of Kentucky 31 fescue, there's a high concentration of toxic endophyte in that bottom third of the plant. Yeah. So, like if you graze short like that, you're going to see more fescue toxicity in your animals as a result.
If you're gonna be baling, and then grazing after, you probably should give it a good enough rest period to come back. Wait till those grass plants have a
tip on them,
point on the end, as opposed to a blunt end, where you can still see where it was mowed.
And that would be the earliest you'd want to come back. Yeah. Like if you can wait longer to put on more leaves on that grass plant, you're gonna be better off. But at the earliest, you at least need to have a tip.
Yeah. As opposed to just grazing it and supplementing purchased hay. Yeah. Sorry. I'm planting oats this year and plan on limit grazing this pasture. Should I push them on the pasture to graze it every day or a few times a week?
We don't have any experience grazing oats.
Yeah. It's a good feed.
I just don't know how the plant's going to respond.
Yeah. When I was working at the Sire Service, we mowed oats as hay, and they grew back. But that was first year oats, so it was kind of young plants, which I guess that would, if you're planting this year. If it's something, I don't know enough to say.
I don't know enough about would you be better off tipping it, or would you be better off just taking what you got and then just nuking it and then letting it grow back. We don't. That's a little bit adjacent to our realm of experience.
They would eat it for sure.
Yeah. That for sure. I think that for sure is a thing. It's just what's the best way of grazing it? I'm not.
Yeah, I don't
really
know the best way.
Yeah.
My
instinct would be to just graze it like you would any other plant.
Yeah, that's what I would think too.
Because there's a lot of biological similarity with all that stuff. If you tip it, there's going to be faster regrowth. If you just graze the top third, there's going to be faster regrowth.
Yeah.
So
and you're going to have the lusher sward.
Yeah. So that would be my instinct.
Graze it like pasture.
Yeah, but
like you would.
But I don't have any experience, so take that for what it's worth.
How to transition from barbed wire fences to electric? That's a good one.
Offset wires.
So yeah, if you have permanent, if you have a perimeter fence that's barbed wire and it's still it'll hold cattle, and it's also dependent on your farm. So let's just say the Arizona project, for example, that Greg went on. The Arizona project that he went there and fenced, it was a big L. So it was 140 acres or something, and it went down and then over. And that was the land there. And then the bottom part of the L was, I think, the road frontage or whatever. And it was all fenced in barbed wire, the whole thing. And what he did to fence that is he went in there and he ran a single strand high tensile wire down the center of that L and then all the way up to the top. and then he also trenched and put in a water line underneath the same single strand high tensile wire. So what that allowed him to do is you could take and you could tie on to your barbed wire fence with like a plastic handle, so it's insulated and it's not going to ground out on the fence. Run your reel to the hot wire that's hot and hook on there, and then just strip graze, one right after another all the way around the L, all the way up to the top, and then back down, and then you just keep that rotation going around the L. So if that's something, that might give you some ideas of as far as putting in, a single strand of high tensile in the middle of your property that you can make fence hot from.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to tear up all your barbed wire and put in perimeter. Also, that you were alluding to.
You could use an offset on your barbed wire. So
offset is in high tensile wire.
Yeah. So like you could run a if your barbed wire fence is not completely up to spec, but some of it is, and you just need a little bit more assurance. You could take a single strand or double strand or whatever of high tensile electrified and just run it 6 inches, 10 inches, offset from like inside from that barbed wire, so the animal will hit that high tensile before it interacts with the barbed wire, and so you could do it that way. The other alternative is just tear everything up if it's really bad, because at the end of the day you need to be able to sleep at night and know that the cattle will be inside the perimeter. Like if they bust through an interior fence, it's not the end of the world. It can be a huge pain and it can wreck your rotations, but you're not going to be chasing cattle all over creation.
Have someone hit a cow and get severely injured.
That would be even worse. So you need to have adequate perimeter fencing, whether that's offset wires on barbed wire, whether that's using good barbed wire that's already there, whether that's tearing up crappy barbed wire and putting in a good solid multi-strand high tensile perimeter. You just need a good perimeter, and then interior stuff should be minimum interior fencing.
Notice Greg did a single strand just up the middle, no crazy paddocks. So it was the Arizona project, they had hired some people from the NRCS or something to come up with this.
I don't know who it was.
Somebody was trying to formulate a grazing plan, and they had all these paddocks. So they'd split it up the middle, and all these high tensile wires
which cost money,
going back and forth, and all these permanent paddocks, each with its own water point, and all. It was like, I don't know, $500,000 to set this thing up. And Greg went in there. And they're like, can you design a grazing like a fence plan for us? He's like, well, let me see what you got. And they're like, no, don't see what we got. We just want you to come up with it. He's like, okay. So we went and kind of drew it out, did the numbers or whatever, and came back and gave it to him. And they're like, what? And and like all he said, the single strand of high tensile and then the water points every 200 feet, quick couplers. And I think it cost like
it was a fraction. I don't know,
$40,000 or something.
It was a fraction,
or less than that probably. Actually,
yeah,
it was like $20,000.
Those might have not been exact numbers, but it's the point stands.
Yeah. And so it's like it doesn't have to be complicated, and you don't really want it to be complicated, because with all those permanent paddocks, say you want to make your paddock two permanent paddocks, the size of two permanent paddocks. How do you do that? You can't. You have to keep them in the single permanent paddock. So.
Yeah.
The least amount of interior infrastructure to start out
the better.
Is better, because you can always add more. It's going to be a pain if fence is in the way, though. So just try to keep it
minimum in the beginning. We got time for like one more question to finish it off.
I think we got one more.
All
Perfect. Right. Gabe Brown has some good stuff on soil health and weaning off of inputs. I have also had recommended to me to only use a partial rate from a soil test. Not all the input is used by the plants.
Yes.
That's a good point.
For people who aren't familiar with what he's talking about, if you get a soil test, so you take samples according to the specifications of whatever university or NRCS or whoever's doing the soil test for you, just follow the instructions to collect your soil samples, send them in. You'll get a report back. and the way that like the way that the way the mindset and the way that a lot of soil tests are, not all of them, but the way that like your standard soil tests are designed is really just to measure the like inorganic compounds in like as in like phosphorus, like nitrogen, like like what else, potassium, like those kinds of levels in your soil, along with the pH and your and like how much organic matter you have and like that kind of stuff, right? But then they'll also give you like recommendations of how many pounds per acre you need to be putting on to adjust your to like get your whatever phosphorus to a point where it needs to be, like in the realm of good or whatever. And the amounts are ludicrous. Like
160 pounds.
Greg tells this story of when he did a cost share one time to put down some phosphorus on a piece of land that he had just acquired. And in the cost share program, you had to put down the amount that was dictated in the soil test. You couldn't put down part of it in order to get the cost share. And so the phosphorus, the truck driver that came in, the spreader who came in to spread it, was like, this is stupid. Like this doesn't make any sense.
It's like, what was like 100? No.
Like, because it literally was like dust on the ground. Like it was like phosphorus on top of phosphorus. It was lime on top of lime. I think it was lime. I don't think it was phosphorus. It was like this amount of lime to increase the pH. It's like, it literally was like a lime dust just on the ground. Like a good layer of it. It's like, he was like, this is dumb. Like this is not even.
The soil can't metabolize.
It's not going to metabolize at all. It's just going to like wash down into the creek. So yeah, it's for sure. Like if you're doing any kind of a soil amendment based on a soil test, that's a good way to like think. Like you should be taking soil tests to understand what you got in your starting point, and if you want to make amendments. But if you do make amendments, just don't go crazy. A little bit goes a long way.
Like put whatever. I don't remember.
I don't even know if a little bit goes a long way. It's more like don't overdo it.
It's like, it's like just do what you can justify doing. Don't feel like you have to
put on
get
the
it all
full
at
amount.
the same time.
Yeah.
That little bit you put on is going to do something.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Yep.
That was a good one.
Wait, we got. No, we have not used a Brix meter on our pastures. I think Greg has one, but we haven't done
measuring the sugar content of the leaf. Yeah.
No, we have not done this.
We haven't
organic matter on the infiltration on the organic matter either. So
no, we have not done that either. We've done some rudimentary soil tests, just to see, but yeah. I mean, we just look a lot of the stuff that we look at a lot of the time is just like understanding, once you have a basic idea of what you got, understanding like what the forage looks like, and like looking for indicator species of either compaction or high acidity or like that kind of stuff, and that sort of dictates like what pieces of land need more attention, what ones are doing really well, that kind of stuff, without having to take a soil test. So anyway, that was a good session. I think we're gonna wrap it up. I think we've definitely gone over an hour. Look for this on YouTube. The link will be in the bio. I'll be posting the full session there.
Thanks for the support.
Thanks for the support, everybody.
It's awesome. We love doing this.
It's pretty cool.
It's cool for us, and it's cool for you guys, and it's it's a good deal.
Yep.
Gets us jazzed up for the week.
Yep.
Gets our brains spinning.
We'll see you guys next Sunday, 7:30. Be there. We'll be there for another good talk. All right. See you, everybody.